let's go to Canberra now. Joining me is Michael Sukkar, the Housing Minister and Assistant Treasurer. Michael Sukkar, thank you for your time. Sad news out of your state of Victoria. 2 deaths overnight, 2 people in their 70s.
Yeah, Laura, it's extraordinarily sad whenever we see the death toll rise, and our heart goes out to those families. And seeing those tragic events occur, I think, just steals everybody's resolve for what we need to do to stop the spread of COVID-19. And I know that's been weighing very heavily on the minds of the National Cabinet.
We have so many cases and they are not consistent around the country. The Prime Minister says whatever comes out of the National War Cabinet, if you like, is a baseline. Do you think that some states that all have different circumstances, like your own, should be making rules that suit their own circumstances?
Well, Laura, there's no doubt that the PM's made very clear that, in his view and the view of the National Cabinet, that, of course, where you've got different circumstances in different states or territories, it's wholly appropriate that, on occasion, different responses will be taken. I mean, the first, I suppose, of those examples was the lockdown initiated by the Northern Territory, who has very vulnerable remote communities. That was obviously the Northern Territory doing what was in the interests of their people, and that is wholly appropriate. Now, that, of course, extends to whether it's New South Wales or Victoria or Queensland, which is obviously seeing the majority of cases and the majority of new cases. So I don't think there's any inconsistency between that position, which says the National Cabinet will come up with a baseline, but where there are circumstances that a particular state or territory who's dealing with a different issue or a more acute issue, that they should undertake heightened or different responses, I think is wholly appropriate. And I know that the National Cabinet and the PM, of course, endorse that.
We should all know by now that social distancing is our best weapon against the spread of coronavirus. If it doesn't work, basically, if we fail as a community, will we need to go into lockdown?
Well, Laura, there's no doubt that we've seen this through a staged approach that most jurisdictions around the world implemented and have implemented as light touch responses as possible and ramped those up as necessary. And our experience has been similar. I think, and I know a lot of Australians have copped a little bit of flack for not following the rules. My experience is somewhat different. In just what I've observed, just even in the last few days, I think has been a remarkable response from Australians on taking it very seriously. I think there has been a real change, and I perhaps have some confidence, Laura, that people are taking it so seriously that the social distancing rules, the no essential travel outside of your house effective rules are being strictly adhered to by the vast majority of Australians. Now, we won't see the fruits of that perhaps for another week, but I have some confidence, Laura, that people are taking it seriously and that will make a difference.
An estimated 1 million people have lost their jobs in recent days. This is a risk to life and livelihoods. Many of those will go on unemployment benefits. Will the government look at the mutual obligation rules that remain in place? From Tuesday, anyone on unemployment benefits still needs to meet those mutual obligation rules. Isn't this tying up people at Centrelink that need to be helping others, but also causing unnecessary strain on people that have just joined the jobless queue, I should say?
Yeah, Laura, look, I think it's worth noting that we have suspended all of the mutual obligation requirements. You're right,
only until Tuesday, though, right?
Correct, until next week. Then, to the extent that any mutual obligation rules apply, they have all been modified to take account for the fact that we don't want people engaging in face-to-face activities. So every single mutual obligation requirement to the extent that it requires any face-to-face activity, has been completely modified to remove that requirement. We've also ensured that the mutual obligation requirements for people like sole traders are very different and take account of their circumstances, which essentially just says to a sole trader that you're trying your best to keep your business going, which of course every sole trader is doing anyway. So it's a mutual obligation requirement that I doubt many of those sole traders would struggle to meet.
But Minister, will you
anyway.
review this? Because the reality is that thousands of jobs every day are being lost. No one is hiring.
Laura, look, there's no doubt it's a pretty extraordinary thing, particularly for a coalition government, to completely suspend mutual obligation. I think that's a pretty strong signal from us to...
We are in extraordinary times, are we not? I mean, can't we just suspend this indefinitely until we are on the other side of this thing?
Well, that's, I think, my point, Laura, that we have taken an extraordinary step because, yes, it's extraordinary times. And what I'm saying to you is you can take that as a pretty strong signal that that we don't disagree with your basic point, which says we want and are doing everything we can to assist people who, through no fault of their own, are unable to work. Their entire industry might be shut down. That's why we've brought in the coronavirus supplement payment, which will bring for many people up to $1,100 or $1,200 a fortnight of payments, in addition to a one-off $750 payment. We are recognising that through no fault of their own, people, many thousands of people who have worked hard their whole lives, who have contributed to the system, who have paid taxes, who have been great citizens, now need something back from their country, and we, I think, have stepped up to the plate in supporting them, and we'll do the same thing with mutual obligation as we have with suspending the requirements. And it's a, you know, Laura, it's a rapidly evolving,
I know, it is.
a rapidly evolving situation.
You're not the minister in charge, and I appreciate this, but can you give us some assurance that the government is looking at this, looking at the indefinite suspension of such rules?
Well, the assurance I can give you, Laura, is that we are looking at everything that makes this very difficult time for those people a little bit easier. And we wouldn't do anything to make a hard time harder for those individuals.
Okay, well, keep us up to date. We thank you for your time today.
Thanks so much, Laura.
Now, New Zealand has entered a 4-week